And that is why we invited someone here to join us today who has really exemplified this kind of leadership that we're talking about. Someone that I have known for many years, and one of the people I most highly regard and admire. He's deep in my heart for all that he has done for education in California. This is our former state superintendent of public instruction, former state senator, former assembly member, who has done great things. Jack O'Connell. He has left such an imprint on California education that continues to live and grow as he continues to do all that he's doing. Jack led the passage of Proposition 39 that lowered the threshold for passing school bonds for construction from the 66.7 level to 55%. The result has been billions and billions and billions of dollars in bonds that would have failed for the schools of California. Jack also sponsored the bill that reduced the class size ratios to 20-1 in the primary grades. This was one of the most popular reforms ever in California, both among the teachers and parents. And further, he authored the legislation that created the high school exit exam to set the floor there to make sure all of our kids are at that base level. So Jack remains a strong supporter and facilitator of partnerships between schools, businesses, communities, philanthropies, in order to engage all for the well-being of our students and for the real-world problems that they face. So most recently, Jack served as the Chief Education Officer at the School Innovations and Advocacy. And ladies and gentlemen, it is just such an honor to introduce to you our former state superintendent, our friend, Jack O'Connell.
Thank you. Thank you. Hard act to follow. Thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. Nancy Katowski for U.S. Senate. What do you think right now? Doesn't it have a nice ring to it? Don't tell Senators Feinstein and Boxer I said that, but what a thank you for that very nice introduction. And please don't tell my daughter that, yes, I did write the law creating the high school exit exam. I mean, I got home from work, and I live in San Luis Obispo, and flew home on a Thursday night like we do, and my wife tipped me off and said, just so you know, your daughter's not speaking to you. And I kind of knew why. She was in 8th grade at the time. And I said, well, why is she not speaking? And she said, well, you'll have to ask her. So at dinner, I look up and I said, Jennifer, you haven't spoken to Dad here. And Dad, I thought you liked me. I said, Jennifer, I do like you. She says, Dad, I've been ostracized by my peers. I said, what do you mean? She says, you don't know what ostracized means? I said, no, I got that. And then she said, but this high school exit exam, I mean, my friends aren't talking to me. And they don't think they're going to be able to pass it. I said, well, Jennifer, you'll be able to pass it. I'm going to be the next state superintendent. I'll get you the answers to the test. So I finally said to her, I said, how are we going to resolve this, Jennifer? And she says, Dad, I want to change my last name. I said, to what? And she said, Schwarzenegger. So I don't know. I mean, it was kind of a tough one. But it's really, really a treat to be here. I mean, you have an outstanding superintendent. I know you know that. But I had a chance to, the counties have a group called CSESA, and all 58 counties, and they meet all the county superintendents about 4 times a year. And as state superintendent, I attended most of the meetings. And it was just really fun for me to watch your superintendent, to see Superintendent Katowski, just her leadership, the opinions that people were asking her, the people were looking to her for advice and counsel. And I know you have a great county superintendent here. But one message I wanted to convey here today, you have a true educational leader in this state here, and one, Nancy Katowski. Thank you for our friendship, and thanks for all you do for public education. Thank you, really. And then this is I had never been to this beautiful facility before, Mark. Boy, had I known it was like this, I'd have got here at noon yesterday, instead of my wife and I driving down here about 7 o'clock last night with my friend Jerry Shelton, who's doing one of the workshops here this afternoon. But what a spectacular facility. Next time you ask me to come here, I'm going to have to come about a week early to prepare the remarks and everything. But first time here, and it kind of reminds me, I want to tell you one or two quick little embarrassing stories. I'm a teacher by profession, and my first day teaching, and it's very true, walked into the classroom in September, wrote my name on the board, Mr. O'Connell, government class. I turned around to a group of 30 smiling kids, and I said, class, this is government. My name's O'Connell. If you're in the wrong room, please leave. The whole class got up and split. I was in the wrong room. So, and of course, who comes walking by but the principal? So I'm glad I had a one-year contract. It would have been a quick career in education. And then Jerry Shelton knows this story. My first day as the elected state superintendent in 2003, I couldn't wait to get to the office. And I couldn't wait to decide where I'm going to put the plaques and the pictures of the family and things. And so I'm there all by myself, 7 in the morning on a Monday, and I hear a knock on the door, you know. And I think, you know, I'm this elected state superintendent cat. I'm an important guy. I better act important. So I picked up the telephone, and I spun my big chair around. And without looking, I just said, come on in. I'll be with you in a minute. And I carried on this make-believe conversation. I said, yes, Governor. Sure. Call me anytime. Gray? No problem at all. Yes, okay, Gray. Sure. I'm glad I could help. Hang up the phone, spin this big chair around. I look at this dude sitting across me on the couch, and I said, my name's Jack O'Connell, state superintendent. I'm an important guy. And he said, well, I'm from the telephone company. I'm here to hook up that telephone right there that you just been talking into. So, I know. So if the phone rings, Nancy, you got it. So, and then the one story Nancy asked me to tell that's very true is several years ago, I was at LAX, and you remember, I mean, we have the United Express, the Delta Connection, or Delta Disconnection, whatever it's called, and was flying to San Luis Obispo, and it was a Friday night, late, last flight. And you remember at LAX, that little remote terminal that they used to have a few years back? So I was on the 11 o'clock plane, last plane on the Friday night, fly to San Luis Obispo. And so I got there a good hour early, and I'd been on the road for over a week. It was 2006, the story, so I was campaigning and things, and couldn't wait to get home. And so I showed up a good hour early, and I walk up to the ticket agent. And I said to the ticket agent, Jack O'Connell, I'm on the 11 o'clock flight. And she says, yeah, Mr. O'Connell, that airplane is sold out, and everybody's already checked in, but I have good news. I'm putting you on the first flight in the morning. It's at 5 a.m. And I said, well, I have bad news. You know, I have a ticket. I have a reservation. I'm a very important person. You got to get me on this plane. And she says, what part of this don't you understand, O'Connell? Airplane full, you on next flight. And so I kind of turn around and I see a group from our local high school wearing the sweatshirt, San Luis High, and one of the students kind of sheepishly came up and said, hey, aren't you that state superintendent dude that's always showing up at our government classes unannounced to give a speech? And I said, yeah, that's me. And she says, well, we're the French class, and we just spent the whole week in Louisiana learning the culture and the language and things, the tradition, and we're all on this airplane. Isn't that fun? And I'm thinking, kid, you got my seat. So then this kid says, we'd like to take a picture with you. Well, I said, okay, because I'm probably looking at a 4-hour drive to get home. And so I said, I have nothing else to do now, and it's about 10:30 at night. And so they didn't want just one picture. There were 26 students, 4 teachers on this 30-seater airplane. And so they wanted 26 cameras. They wanted 26 pictures. But it's an election year, so I'm going to do anything I can to win. So I'm standing in the corner taking pictures with all these people. Corner of my eye, I see people coming out of the lines, the Carlsbad flight, the Bakersfield flight, to take a picture with me. And now this airplane's starting to load. So we're taking all these pictures, and the flight ticket agent, who wouldn't give me the time of day, came over to me and said, we just realized who you are. I didn't know that. And she says, if it's the last thing I do, I'm getting you on this plane. She says, I've never missed one of your movies. So, of course, I am desperate to get on this plane. So I ask her which one of my flicks she likes the best. And she starts naming all these big-time movies. And she says, do you always fly under an assumed name, Mr. Hanks? So I said, you understand why I have to do that. It's security reasons. And she says, well, may I call you Tom? And I said, of course. And so she says, well, Mr. Hanks, if it's the last thing I do, I'm going to get you on this plane. So they have a jump seat between the pilot and the co-pilot. They put some kid in the jump seat, and I got the exit row. I was the happiest guy to play. So I fly home. My wife picks me up, and I tell her this story. And she says, you, Tom Hanks, you look more like Forrest Gump than you look like... So let's see. Hey, you've been a great crowd. I'm out of here. We'll see you later, Nancy. Nancy asked me to talk about, in my remaining 2 minutes, to talk about, and it's entitled in your agenda, Building a Strong Governance Team. And she asked if I could talk a little bit about how to put that team together, how to have sustainability in terms of leadership. And she also said, can you tell newly elected school board members, and she said, not everybody's going to be, you're going to have some experienced superintendents and some good friends of mine that are here, and some school board members who've been around for 29 years, and Judy, and Betty, but could you pretty much speak to some of the folks newly elected? And so I said I'd be happy to give it a shot. And so to me, leadership in education is much different than leadership in the private sector. I mean, in the private sector, for the most part, you gauge leadership by success, looking at the bottom line. Are the shareholders happy? Are the stockholders happy? Have you been sued lately? And in education, it's really a different mindset. In education, I've always felt the true leader in education, and it's been said here eloquently already by Nancy, by Betty, and by Judy, it's make decisions with what's in the best interest of the student. And it sounds somewhat simple and trite, but that really is, I believe, as an elected school board member, our role. And I can say that because the one part Nancy didn't mention, I was on the County Board of Education in Santa Barbara. And that might have been the most difficult job I ever had, even in 20 years in the legislature. And some guy named Sam Farr and I were roommates for a number of years. And I think one of the most difficult jobs is being on the County Board of Education. One reason is you go to the grocery store, what normally takes 15 minutes is going to take you an hour, because people are going to stop and talk to you, right? And that's important. But I also think the difference in the private sector is you'll have a CEO or a president who can make decisions and then implement the decisions. And quite frankly, I think Governor Schwarzenegger had a hard time with that initially. He came from private sector, very successful, incredibly successful empire he had built. And I think he had a hard time recognizing you just don't have that edict, you just can't make that decision and expect everyone in the legislature or even in the bureaucracy in Sacramento to follow through with that magic wand that didn't exist. So I really do believe that you need to consciously try to make decisions what's in the kid's best interest. Even if you have a declining enrollment district and a student wants to transfer to another school district, and that student that's going to leave, maybe it's in the AP classes, it's going to help you with your API, captain of the football team, great kid, but wants to take a program someplace else, if it's in that kid's best interest and you're going to lose the dough because you're going to lose that kid, you got to let the kid go. And so that's what I mean by, that's a quick example of making decisions in students' best interest. And then I think it's also important that you make decisions in a collaborative manner. But one more point on making decisions for the kids. When I was sitting on the Education Committee in the legislature, and I was on it for 20 years in the Assembly and Senate, I got frustrated at times by thinking, I always knew where the School Board Association, outstanding advocacy team, and they represent from the perspective of elected school board members, as they should. The teachers have a strong lobby. It's CT something, CT A or B or C. Strong advocacy. The classified personnel, and they gave me the award, I'm a lifetime member. The school business officials, CASBO, great organization. Parents have a strong lobby up there. The PTA, I think I'm also a lifetime member there. And they do a great job. And I can remember getting frustrated years ago and saying to our committee, let's go hold our committee hearings and talk about real issues with real students, real kids, and not be greeted by the superintendent, with all due respect to all my superintendent friends. Let's not be greeted by the principal. Let's only hear from students. Let's be welcomed by the ASB president. Let's only hear from students. And I remember this one hearing that we had a little bit north of here. We're up in the San Mateo area, as I recall. And we were talking about drugs in schools and campuses. And we were trying to talk about a curriculum and how to give the students the tools to say no to drugs, high school. And every single kid at the table came up and told us publicly, if you wait to high school, it's too late. And so somebody asked a question, is it middle school? Every student said, you better start in 4th grade. You better start in 3rd grade. You have to start early. We never heard that in Sacramento. Perhaps naive on some of our parts, but it was just in some of the environments that we grew up in. But these students were telling us, something that we had never heard in Sacramento. So we had to then design a curriculum that's age appropriate for the elementary grades. So I think that's important for you. You need to, as elected school board members, truly listen. And not just hear, but truly listen. And you're going to be attempted to be influenced by special interest groups. But again, I mean, you might have a friend who has a towing company. And maybe now with the passage of this initiative to make it easier to conserve energy, it's going to become a towing company and solar energy company. Well, be careful if a person doesn't have that much experience but is a personal friend. And then Nancy also asked me to talk a little bit about my leadership style. And it's one that I really tried to not be top-down, but rather ground up. And I think that's more difficult, can be harder, and can be just more challenging. But I really do think that in terms of sustainability, getting people to buy in to where you want to go is the right approach. And I can give you some examples. At the Department of Education, I pretty much knew I wanted to work on achievement gap issues my last 4 years. So we met with all of the superintendents, the Jerry Sheltons, the Gavin Paynes, the really smart folk at the department. And I said, I think this is the direction I want to go. Can you help us get there? And then they came up with a roadmap, some ideas that I had never thought of in terms of how to be able to give school districts the necessary tools to close the achievement gap. One thing that Jerry came up with, he said, Jack, it's possible for our districts to even see the achievement gap widen and still be rated, with all 800, to be a distinguished school, to be a blue ribbon school. And so I said to Jerry, I challenged him, I said, help us change the accountability system so that if your subgroups, kids here learning the English language, kids from low socioeconomic backgrounds, kids of color, special ed community, that we changed our accountability system. So each one of those subgroups now has its own growth target. And so it's impossible for you to have a good test score, good accountability, unless you're closing that achievement gap. So we're holding you accountable for that. But we had to design that system to make that happen. People said to me, so many of the schools in these low-income areas don't have enough AP classes. So we put more AP classes online. I'm a big believer in career technical education, because I know not every kid's going to go to college, and this surprises people when I say it, but that's okay. But I'll tell you what isn't okay. It's not okay to make sure every single kid's not prepared for success in the real world and has to be able to have a profession, a job, and be a contributing member of the community like you are doing here by giving up your time here today. So one of the things we did, and I'll always remember the number, the day I took office as state superintendent, we had in the entire state 288 classes in career tech that were A through G, that colleges accepted. We set out to work closely with UC and CSU, and today we're over 13,000 career tech classes, because career tech and college prep should not be mutually exclusive. It's a different way to learn the important career tech. That's why programs like ROP and some of the great programs that Nancy administers here are some of the best programs in the entire state of California. Nancy referenced to Prop 39 that I took the leadership role on. That was we reduced the vote threshold. We've raised over $30 billion for school facilities. And the way we did it is I tried to identify the folks that would be supportive. Some of our strongest allies were the real estate community, because you stop to think about it. If you're going to buy a new house and if you have kids, what's the second question you're going to ask that realtor? And if that realtor can say, we have a brand new, modern, state-of-the-art school, or we're adding on to a school, the price of the house goes up. I never so misread a group. I spoke to the statewide realtors in San Francisco several years ago, and I gave the pitch, you have kids, you have friends with kids, you need a strong economy. All they want to know is, O'Connell, how can my school be a 1010? Because if that school's a 1010, it adds $100K to the price of the house and my commission. Yeah, and that's all they wanted to know was, how can you be a 1010? What criteria are you looking at? The developers, the BIA, the building community, they realized so many local agencies were saying, we can't issue the building permits because we don't have the capacity in the schools. They were some of our strongest allies. And obviously, we were able to get the building community and the education community to pass Prop 39. So that's pretty much how we did it. So if as an elected school board member, you want to start, maybe it's a before school program or after school program, be sure you, and working with your superintendent, you talk about those folks going to be affected. They're going to be nutrition considerations, transportation considerations, security considerations. So make sure you talk to those folks as well. So from the ground up, be as inclusionary as you possibly can. I think it is more difficult, that collaborative style, but it is much more sustainable. You get folks to buy in. And then I want to give you a word of caution, and I've learned this the hard way. And Nancy said it earlier. As an elected trustee, people will look at you differently. People will look at you differently. People are going to ask your opinion, and that opinion has more meaning, and it's going to be repeated. So I've learned there's no such thing as a private conversation. You can talk to somebody offline and kind of express your opinion, and before you know it, that opinion is being expressed someplace at an event you weren't even at. And so you need to make sure that you're cautious. People are going to ask you for your endorsement of different issues, different candidates. Be sure you ask your superintendent the ramifications. Ask somebody with political experience like a Nancy Katowski here as well. And you do become the face of your district. You are that role model. And then let me tell you what you don't do as a newly elected trustee. You don't go out and hire the principal, not your role. You don't go out and hire the counselor or the librarian. You're not going to be the one ordering the food for the cafeteria. And we certainly don't trust you with the most important role in school, and that is scheduling the football team for the Friday night and whom they play. But what your role is to work with your superintendent. And if you don't have a superintendent, probably the most important thing you'll do is go out and find one. But you want to make sure that you work in a collaborative way. What you do is you can help set policy, set goals, establish that mission statement for your school district, and then be sure that you work in a collaborative manner with your superintendent. I mentioned on the achievement gap. I decided, my last 4 years, that's what I wanted to work on, and you can gauge me if I've been able to work to put in place some programs if we were successful. And we did that, as I mentioned, with more AP classes, the career technical education, and to have high standards, high expectations for all students. So let me close with this, what's happening in Sacramento today. The amount of reform coming out of Sacramento I have never seen in my 30-plus years. Jerry's been in Sacramento for about 90 years doing this. Is he laughing? He's my ride home. I hope he's laughing. And Jerry and I will say the same thing at the workshop we're doing this afternoon, that we have never seen so much significant, truly fundamental reform in education. I mean, the funding system, the local control funding formula, the keywords, local control, the accountability system, the LCAP, which stands for the Local Control Accountability Program, with the Common Core standards that are in place and the new assessments. I mean, it's just been dramatic, just dramatic. And guess who's on the front line to make sure this works? We're looking at them. You are the folks on the front line. So I learned a new word last year, subsidiarity, from Governor Brown. And subsidiarity from the governor's lips, it's more local control. And that's what he's a firm believer in. And so what that means is sometimes, let's be careful what you ask for, but it also is more responsibility for you at the local level. We're going to have fewer categorical programs where the state pretty much dictated what it is you have to provide. Those decisions now, whether you want to provide those programs at all, are going to be on your hands. Public support for public education remains very high. Poll after poll after poll. I've never seen it where education's been below 2 in terms of importance and being a priority. Local school bonds, we're passing 80% of them, and we need to have a statewide bond as well. Candidates running for office always talk about they're going to be a friend of education. It's real clear that people in this state and the people in your community here in Monterey County clearly want to invest in the future. And you only invest in the future when you invest in public education. I'm absolutely convinced if we continue to work hard and we continue to work smart and if we continue to work together, the best is yet to come for public education. Then and only then, the best is yet to come for the great state of California. Thank you very much for having me here today. Thank you.